here you have your wonderful scale that you can learn and use to see where your client is at. Notice that the best range is between 30 and 60. Notice that when it's really, really high, 70 and upwards, the person may have learned to buffer the toxic people around them. I know they're there, but I'm not going to argue with them, and I'm not going to fight, and I'm not going to let them drain me. I'll just kind of put them in the freezer and not think about it. This is normally what this high score means. Anything from 20 downwards is something that we really must address and help our client through. When someone has a low trait, pressure management trait, how do we help them? So we can ask these questions. Some of these questions are in the test, so they will have already answered similar questions, and this is why they got a low pressure management score. Okay, we need to help them identify a name, 2 names, 3 names, hopefully not, maybe just 1. And we can ask these questions. So let's try and go through, let's try and identify who this person is. And you can ask all of these questions. Who is the person that you are unable to influence? Who do you always have that you end up arguing with, or that you have to over-explain things to? Who causes you anxiety or concern or preoccupation, etc., etc., etc. And so you can use all of them, some of them, to guide your client or your team member to identify who is the toxic person who influences them negatively. Because we must work, the management protocol entails that you have one person to focus on and to implement the protocol with. So the first thing to do is identify who the toxic person is. We help them identify the people. Step number 1, we double check that there are people who exhibit the characteristics that we have seen earlier. So we ask them to tell us examples. We check if there are compromises that they have accepted. Yeah, I really don't want to go, but I go see my mother-in-law every Sunday for lunch. I walk away from that lunch exhausted and depleted, but we have to go. What can we do? So that's a huge compromise, because it means that I use my Sunday, that instead of using my Sunday to re-energize and replenish and maybe spend time with people that I love, I use my Sunday to lose out energy. And I start my Mondays depleted. So that's a big compromise. We need to ask questions and find out what other compromises there might be that are draining your clients emotionally. And then we want to empower our clients to modify communication with their toxic person, or when possible, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a college friend, maybe it's a member of the community, cut ties. If it isn't a very important or strategic or immediate family relationship, sometimes it's just easier to just cut ties. And we have to legitimize them to do that without arguing or without a lot of drama, without any of that. Simply fade out the relationship with gentleness. But sometimes these people need to be authorized to put their well-being first. Okay. Now let's look at the protocol. This is a protocol that has worked with hundreds and hundreds of clients, of employees, of also as in couples, because sometimes our partner or our spouse engages in a little bit of a demotivating and toxic communication. So you can also use it to help your clients be more motivating or stop being demotivating with their spouse. It's very simple. I'll just go through the steps, but again, we can dive into questions in our Q&A sessions. So obviously, we want to maintain a fundamental ethical behavior towards our toxic people, which seems counterintuitive, but really we We need to stop doing things that we know are not correct towards them. If we say we are going to do something, we need to keep that promise. Or we need to simply say that we are not going to do that. So say what you're going to do and do what you said you were going to do. This is a fundamental first step. Also, we need to kind of ask ourselves, honestly, is there anything true about the criticisms that they sent at us? Sometimes there is. So we need to fix that and not bring that into the relationship anymore. This takes away all sorts of ammunition. And that's the first step. Second step, we do not fight. We do not engage in confrontation, even if we are provoked, even if we are right, because engaging in confrontation provides short-term relief, but it is emotionally draining. So we tell them that they're right. Yeah, you're right. Sure, do what you like. No problem. But we do not get pulled into a confrontation or an argument, even if we are right. The price to be right is too high. In a team management scenario, if you identify that you have toxic employees, you need to train them to start checking their communication, or you need to fire them, or you need to move them somewhere in a role where their communication will not influence negatively anybody else, if you want to keep them. You want to eliminate the element of surprise. You know what they're like, so you accept the attitude. You don't always say, oh, I wish you weren't so negative all the time. That is opening the door to a confrontation. Instead, this is how they are. They're negative. They see negative, they report negative, and they speak about negative things, and they filter out the positive. So we need to have a certain level of acceptance. We cannot help or save those who do not want to be helped or saved. We just need to accept that that's how they are. However, we can manage them. And before managing them, we need to manage ourselves, because we mustn't react. We mustn't get pulled in. We mustn't engage in confrontation. We must be ethical and say what we mean and mean what we say. Okay? We obviously, this is the fourth point of the protocol, we do not talk to our negative person about negative news or ask them for help with things that we find difficult. No, we go and vent our problems or ask for help to our motivating, positive, action-oriented, solution-oriented peers. If we don't have them, we must find them. If our client doesn't have them, we must help them find them. Because when we go and speak about our negative news or our worries, or we ask help because we are in a difficult situation to our toxic person, that person who lives life fear-based or anger-based or failure-based will obviously throw all of that on us. I told you shouldn't have done this. See, now you've invested money, and now this is all going down the drain. What are you going to do? You have children. You have responsible for a family. This is not something intelligent that you should have done. So they might even give you the help, money or loan or whatever it is, but it comes with a really high price. So we never go vent our worries or ask for help to our toxic person. We must go to positive peers. So we must have positive peers. So when possible, when we cannot cut ties with our toxic people, we want to space out our meetings or time with them, and make them random and sporadic, while increasing time with positive people. And once we have learned how to manage them, we can have a clear conversation with them about new boundaries. But that comes later on. So once I've done all of this and the relationship already starts changing a little bit, we can have a really clear conversation with our demotivating or toxic person and establish new boundaries, because we are no longer drained, we are no longer depleted, we are surrounded by positive peers, we feel safe and held, and with that strength, we can go and say, this is not acceptable anymore. So if you want to see me every Sunday at lunch, this is how it's going to happen. Otherwise, it is not going to happen. And it's very peaceful and gentle, but very firm at the same time. However, this is a management protocol. And as you can see, this second last step comes right before the end, because first we need to regain energy and hold it. Okay, so we must accompany our client to follow these steps in this order. Obviously, if nothing changes in the relationship with their toxic person, then they're just gonna have to make a decision. And everybody makes decisions that they can live with at the right time for them, and we can just kind of hold that space, help them through it, give them authorization and permission to legitimize the decision to save themselves, because that's the most important. Sometimes you might have a client who recognizes him or herself as a toxic person. So the moment that someone says, oh God, but I do this, maybe I'm a toxic person, automatically you know that they are not. Because one of the characteristics of a toxic person is they do not question their ways. They're not self-aware. Okay, so if you have a client who recognizes that they do engage in toxic communication, you might want to help them engage in positive communication. So you help them become self-aware when they do have a demotivating communication, with whom, if they always highlight the faulty details, or if they filter out the positive, you can help them notice with whom they do that, when they do that. And then you can help them practice using motivating communication, which we will see in the next slide. Sometimes managers need to point out mistakes. Sometimes a consultant needs to point out that the client has been inefficient, or they haven't done what they were supposed to do. But we can always use the sandwich formula. You say something positive, you celebrate the effort or something about the person. Then you give out the negative behavior, specific behavior incident that happened. It's never about the person, it's always about the behavior, but when you did this and you created this result, this had this impact. So this doesn't work. That's the negative part. And then we close out with an encouraging, motivating, but come on, we're going to fix it. What can you do now to fix it and move forward and not do this again? Blah, blah, blah. So this is a really simple formula that I'm sure you know it already, but you can teach it to clients that have a very abrasive communication and can be a little bit toxic at times. The general principle of a positive communication is to leave people feeling better, uplifted, safer, seen, valued, encouraged. You want to leave people better than when you have found them. And so this is something that obviously we know, because that's really our job, right? But some clients might not know. Some employees do not know this, and they just speak as it comes spontaneously to them, not really aware that the impact that they create and how they influence their peers. So motivating communication, a few tips for you to consider. So much. When you report negative news, always be specific. Day, time, specific behavior, specific consequence. Very, very specific. So the bad news needs to be kept to a minimum. We don't want to highlight all the things that are not working unless obviously there's a correction to be made. We want to focus more on conveying positive news. This is especially true for managers who are so stretched thin so much of the time, and they're trying to keep everything together. And it's much quicker to say, fix this, this is not working, this is not working. But instead, we must really focus more on conveying positive news, find ways to share appreciation, celebrate, value the people in your team. When we relay communication, so when we report news, we must not modify them, except maybe to remove criticism. So we do the opposite. When we want to keep our communication clean and motivating, we don't report the bad details, we report the good things. and avoid negative gossip or hearsay. We avoid all of this stuff. So we do not want to cause unnecessary upset. People who engage in a motivating communication style are people who are wanting to create a positive impact, who are constantly trying to improve themselves and are very open to training. Okay. And I know that I have a positive communication style if the people around me are serene, they're doing well, they're in good spirits, and they smile and collaborate, and they are proactive and take initiative. So we as guides obviously do this. As managers, sometimes it's really hard to do this because we are so overwhelmed, but we must learn to do this. And also we need to teach it to our team leaders in our companies, because this is a fundamental basics to influence people positively while keeping errors and misbehaviors in check. Wonderful. We come to the end of this lesson. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite traits, and it has such a great impact on the entire spectrum of traits. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next class.